were immersers. That means they were daily bathers. They bathed daily at dawn. The pseudo-Clementines give you a complete picture of these groups. So I, in my work, have associated that Barsabbas with something to do with bathing groups. Now, that's not a provable point. Anyway, Barabbas, for instance, is actually called Jesus. Jesus Barabbas at some point in the Gospels. So he bears the name of a Jesus family member, Jesus himself. And in the way he's interchanged with Jesus, because whereas Jesus is supposed to be arrested and tried and executed, Jesus Barabbas is supposedly the mob wants free. I mean, these are mirror images of each other. There are two Jesuses there. And there's the revolutionary Jesus, the Jesus Barabbas, and then there's the crucified Jesus, the Jesus who we call the Christ. But Barabbas literally does mean son of the Father. Bar is son, Abba is father. Barabbas actually does mean son of the Father, son of God. So there's a lot of, you say, well, what are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that these are things you need to think about, juggle. I think I have a feeling of, after many years thinking about them, what is going on, but you have to do a lot more holding information in your mind and then seeing what the repetitions create as we go. So let's hold off on it. So there is an election, and a person called Matthias is elected. And unknown person, unknown in history before, and basically unknown afterwards. There is one notice about him in Eusebius. I think he was bitten by a snake, supposedly, but that's about it. There's no other notice about him in any place that I've ever seen. So what's the point? What is the point? What is his role? The role is he fleshes out, according to the Gospel and Acts picture, the 12 apostles scheme. Was there a 12 apostle scheme? That's what Acts and Apostles is arguing. But then who are the disciples? You know, why do we have all of the disciples? Why doesn't Paul ever speak about 12 apostles? He speaks of the other apostles. I saw only James. For him, the apostles are not numbered as such, as far as I can tell. There may be something in Paul literature that has 12, but I'm not. Yeah, there is in the citing, but the resurrection sightings in Corinthians, but that's considered to be there's considered to be an interpolation there. We'll talk about that another time. But generally speaking, the apostles are not numbered, and Paul and James is one of the apostles as far as Paul is concerned. So I mean. Where did the idea that it had to be 12 come into play? 12 for the Jewish tribe, but there were no Jewish tribes as such left. So in any case, that's a question that has to be, according to Acts' presentation of the history, there were 12 and there have to continue to be 12. And that's why we have this election. In my view, the election is a totally innocuous affair. It has no meaning. It achieves nothing, and the main election is ignored. Yet the person who is elected in the early church later appears in Acts as if we know who he is. So to my mind, the authors of Acts have substituted, and that's my own cynical view, and you don't have to agree with it, this election, or whatever it is, for the other election, because the other election was either too painful, too controversial, or too distressing to actually present, because the other election represents a point of view Acts is opposed to. It's sort of like someone in Bush's party presenting the election of Kerry. You know, let's not talk about that 100 years later. So again, my view is not, as Ron said, gospel. This is gospel, what you have before you, and I can be, if you go according to this view here, you're in good company. About 10 billion other people have gone according to this view. So don't feel that you're in a minority if you go according to this view. But I do think that something to think about.
See, that word episcopal used in
Yeah, to me that's a
would
really,
be totally out of character.
I think it's totally out of character, and therefore I feel that it's the you know how animals have vestiges of a previous, you know, like there's, I forget what, that, you know, frogs or whatever it is have the wings, or I forget what these things, what that residual, that it's the other, it's a holdover from the previous presentation that's been overwritten. That's my idea. That's all in the book of James, if you want to read it, that I've written, and that's why it's what people like the book. Notice here, Judas fell away, line 25. You know, when James is either is thrown down the steps in the Pseudo-Clementines or is thrown from the wing of the temple, he falls down. You say, oh, so what? Well, it's just as odd. Judas fell away. What do you mean Judas fell away, line 25? And what about the picture of how Judas fell here, line 18? He fell face down, his bowels gushed out, which contradicts the picture in Matthew, is it 26? We can go back to it just to be, once again, Matthew 27:3, I think it is. Let's just take a quick look at that. Matthew 27. Then Judas, who had betrayed him, seeing he was condemned, being sorry, brought back the 30 pieces, saying, I have sinned, I have betrayed innocent blood, throwing down the pieces in the temple, and so on, and we can talk about that another time. He went away and hanged himself. And so on. It's a totally different presentation than the other presentation. So there's a lot of issues here to consider. So you say, so what? So you have to worry about these matters if you're trying to reconstruct what occurred, which is what I'm trying to do. Okay, chapter 2, Pentecost. Now, if you know the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know that Pentecost was the day of reunion of the wilderness camps in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, see, we didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls for 2,000 years to deal with here. In Paul's letters, Paul is rushing to Jerusalem in time to get there for Pentecost. Why is he rushing to Jerusalem in time to get there to Pentecost? Because Pentecost is an important festival for the early church, just as it is for the community that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I don't think that's accidental. Now, here's the difference. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, the reunion of the desert camps, in the document called the Damascus document,